areas around it, because what that can give you under the right circumstances is some ground penetration. You can see what's under the ground. And eventually, Dr. Philip Christensen at ASU, Arizona State, put out an image, and it was not really what we were looking for, but it was like these 9 strips of images, and it all depended on how you took these 9 individual images, lined them up, overlaid them on each other, and then processed them using certain special processing. And none of us really knew how to do it because it was a different kind of imagery than visual imagery. And eventually this guy came into our message board and was kind of asking around, like, who was a smart guy about imaging? And he eventually found a guy named Keith Laney, who's got a great website. And Keith's done a ton of work. He worked on Mars orbiter camera images for Mars Global Surveyor, and so he's worked kind of as a contractor for NASA, and taught Keith how to do this stuff. And eventually, one of us had the idea that, well, why don't we take the visual images and lay them over the top of the infrared images and see what we get, because we kept getting this weird pattern. When we did that, it turned out the pattern was a city underneath the ground in Cydonia, where the face on Mars is. It was literally a glowing city that was probably buried in ice. And this was pretty amazing stuff, and we were going back and forth and saying, wow, what are we gonna, how are we gonna put this out? And this is the smoking gun, it's all over, right? And then we decided to have a second image processor repeat the work. So he downloaded the images from the ASU website, and he was like, guys, I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting the same stuff. It's not coming through. And he showed us what he had, and it was garbage. And at first we thought he didn't know what he was doing, but Keith walked him through everything and gave him the software. And sure enough, it turned out that they had switched the images that they had posted on the internet. And they thought they got away with it, but at the time, not that many people knew about something called the Internet Archive, which is where they actually go through and sort of, what do they call it, crawl the web, and they'll take a date and a timestamp of when a website was changed. So we were like, okay, Keith, when did you download this? And he downloaded it at like 11:56 p.m. on, I don't know, September 29th, and the website was changed at like 12:15 the next day. So literally, they were watching Keith's IP address. When he went in and downloaded the data, they flipped it to something. So the idea was that they wanted us to put this information out and show these pictures, and then nobody that downloaded the image would be able to repeat it because they had flipped the real image for a fake image. And obviously, if you process the one, you were going to get all these buildings and train stations and all this incredible stuff that's under the ground in Cydonia. So, not being very bright guys, a few months after that, they decided to have a public forum at Caltech where Dr. Michael Malin was going to be there and Dr. Philip Christensen. So I decided I was going to go. And I went there, and I had all the stuff. I had the screen prints of the date and timestamp where the website had been changed right after Keith had downloaded it. And anyway, they did a lecture, they did a presentation. It was really interesting because Dr. Philip Christensen brought up the face on Mars, another thermal infrared image where it was so bright that the whole side of the face was glowing like it was lit up at 4:30 in the morning before, pre-dawn. It wasn't even dawn yet. And that can't happen unless it was made of metal or something that wasn't natural rock or stone. And he kind of smirked, and all these people that go to Caltech, they're all trained not to believe in any of this stuff. And they were all like, why is he showing that? I'm sitting there going, yeah, because he's trying to get you people to wake up. And anyway, so there's a panel of them up there, including Malin, and I had a lot of back and forth with Malin in public, publishing articles. He responded to the articles. Other people I worked with had him too, and so we were kind of public enemy number one. So they got done, and I don't know if this story is interesting or not. I hope so. But they got done, and they decided to open it up for questions, right? And the first guy, the guy that was running things, was Dr. Arden Albee, who is. He's like a demagogue with a PhD. I mean, no matter what you put in front of him, he refuses to believe there's any possibility that there was ever a civilization on Mars, and he's just really angry about it, right? He's like, well, come on, anybody, ask a question, right? So I'm sitting there and nobody gets up, so I'm like, I have a question. So I walked up and I go to the microphone and he goes, oh, tell us your name. I said, well, I'm Mike Bara. And Malin goes, oh God, and he ran and he actually went behind the curtain and hid. And then I started to ask my question, and I saw him pop his head out like this, and I said, it's okay, Mike, you can come out. My question's for Phil. So anyway, the evening went on. I put Phil Christensen on the spot. I basically nailed him to the ground and said, he said that the image with all the artificial stuff on it that you guys put out, that's not ours. We never changed the website. And I'm like, you know what the Internet Archive is? So anyway, we nailed him to the ground, but it was funny because all I had to do was say my name, and Malin just hid behind the curtain. I mean, literally hid behind the curtain. So there's also another great story that Dr. John Brandenburg can tell you sometime about Mars, where they were in a meeting with Carl Sagan, who was very well versed on and very enthusiastic about the face on Mars and Cydonia in private. And one of the guys who later ran his planetary society, I think it was Louis Friedman or Freed, I forget his name. Carl was trying to get him to look at some of the new pictures that Carlotto had processed of the face, and the guy hid his face behind a stack of books. So what we're dealing with in academia is we're dealing with a bunch of people who, some of them are open-minded. The ones that are open-minded already know what's really there, but they've been co-opted, like Carl Sagan. Carl privately was very kind and generous to everybody. In fact, he's the one who helped Dr. Carlotto get his science papers on the face actually published. He was the one who suggested that he try to publish them in optics journals rather than physical sciences journals or some of the space stuff, nature and things like that. So that was private. In public, he was very, very negative, very, always putting things down. And the other guys that are there inside are just dumb. They just either don't want to know, or they're not very bright, or they just aren't willing to face the reality that everything that they've been taught about our solar system is completely wrong. And, like you talked about, there are at least 2 planets, 2 super Earths in this solar system that exploded. Mars was a moon of one of those planets. There are, I don't know what slides we're showing. There is a monolith.
It's the corn nut.
The corn nut. Oh, the corn nut. Okay. Our own planet Earth. You ever buy a bag of corn nuts? And they're all pretty much the same, right? They're pretty normal looking corn nuts. But there's always one that's all twisted and bent up. That's what the Earth looks like, without the volatiles, without the oceans. People say the Earth is spherical, but it's not spherical. It's this weird, truncate, beaten up, messed up shape, and there is no explanation for that in the physical sciences, in planetary science. Everything else is spherical. Pluto is spherical. Ceres is spherical, because the spin energy of these things as they cool makes them into a sphere. So what the heck happened to the planet Earth? And why is it the only major body in the solar system that is not spherical? And why doesn't anybody talk about it? That's what I don't get. Now, to me, the mystery is fairly obvious. Sitchin talked about that the Earth at one time was formed into a previously larger body called Tiamat, and it was struck by a moon of Nibiru and broken into 2 pieces. One of which he says became the moon. I have my doubts about that, but the other piece was what's left of the Earth. So that's what we're looking at now. And again, this totally supports an alternative view of our solar system and our science. This is one of the things I'm talking about in my lecture, my workshop tomorrow at 10 a.m., so you don't have to get up as early as you did today, but at 10 a.m. in Los Angeles A, and I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about whether we really detected gravitational waves or something else. I'm going to talk about this new planet 9 that's been found, or planet X. Jason, let's call it planet X, right? Because that's really what it is. It's the 10th planet we've all been looking for, that's been theoretically detected by the pull that it's exerting on other small bodies. We're going to talk about all these different things that are going on that are being revealed slowly but surely, things that everybody on this side of the aisle, the non-academics, the non-co-opted, NASA-funded guys, we've been talking about Planet X and gravitational waves and torsion waves and all this stuff for decades and decades. And in the end, what always happens? We end up being proved right, and all those that doubted us and said we were crazy, they tell us we're the crazy ones, we end up being right and they end up being wrong. And I think it's really important for us to take credit for our victories and recognize that we're ahead of the curve here. You know, that's one of the definitions for crazy, is the fact that you're a little bit ahead of the curve. The other thing I'm going to talk about is it's now beginning to look to me like a lot of the pictures from the rovers that NASA says are from Mars are not in fact taken on Mars. And I'm going to show you some stuff tomorrow which I hope will freak you out, that may convince you that they're actually taken on Earth, not on Mars. And then the question becomes, why would NASA take a risk like that to put out images of what they say is Mars that you can basically look at and probably prove are not from Mars? So what's the agenda? What's going, Linda's into the big disclosure thing. I'm not so convinced about disclosure, but like maybe what's being disclosed is they're waiting for somebody to really catch NASA at this and expose them. And maybe people will stop believing that they tell the truth because they never tell the truth. So that's what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, and hopefully a lot of you will join me, and I promise I will show you some stuff you have not seen before.
Thank you, Mike.